Hi there, and welcome to True Hope Cast, where we take a deep dive into mental health's many physiological and psychological aspects in this wild but beautiful world. This is the show for you if you're looking for motivation, inspiration, knowledge, and solutions. That's what we are all about here at True Hope Canada. And True Hope Canada is a mind and body based supplement company dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non-invasive nutritional means. For more information about us, please visit truehopecanada.com. Today, I welcome Chelsea Cole to the podcast. Now, Chelsea is a licensed psychotherapist, a coach, and speaker specializing in narcissistic abuse and relationship trauma. She's the author of If Only I'd Known: How to Outsmart Narcissists, Set Guilt-Free Boundaries, and Create Unshakeable Self-Worth. She's currently pursuing a doctorate in social psychology from Liberty University. Now, something new for the podcast, we're going to be asking each guest for solution-based ideas to a specific question. Today, Chelsea's question is, what red flags show you that you have a narcissist in your life? And the grand topic for our discussion today is going to be warning signs that you are being narcissistically abused. Enjoy the show. Chelsea, welcome to True Hope Cast. Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you? What is going well?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. And we were just chatting about how the weather is. It's quite hot here. I'm in Tennessee, but it's going good. It's going into the fall season, which is my favorite. So I'm super excited for the pumpkins.
Yeah, fall season's a super fun one for sure. I like wearing cardigans. I like going out
Yes.
wrapped up in kind of windier, cooler temperatures. And yeah, the pumpkins and the pumpkin patches, it's a whole new dynamic for the kids. Let's go out and do that type of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, fall season's the best. I think most people would agree with you.
Yes, I know. I've seen so many TikToks and people out there about like it's pumpkin season. When you go to Walmart and they finally put the Halloween stuff up, people are like, yes, it's here.
Yeah, they usually do that 2 months before though. So,
Yeah,
sometimes,
it's okay.
yeah,
We're
it's all
ready for
good.
it.
Yeah, we are. That's great. Well, today we're going to be discussing the warning signs you are being narcissistically abused. And at the end of the podcast, we're going to offer some solutions to the question, what red flags should you, what red flags show you that you have a narcissist in your life? So
Mm.
we're going to cover that towards the end of the course of the talk. And I'm sure we're going to cover very many different topics, which are going to evolve around that. But just to kick things off, would you mind giving us a bit of an introduction to who
hmm
you are and what it is that you do, please?
hmm I'm a psychotherapist and certified partner trauma therapist specializing in narcissistic abuse and relational trauma. I always tell people that I get it on many levels. I have been there too. I'm not just a therapist who decided to specialize in this. I've kind of been dealing with narcissists unknowingly all my life. Had many relationships with them and continue to have to deal with them in some capacity. So I get it on many levels. I'm also an author. I just wrote a book, which I'm sure we can talk about, but very excited about that as well.
Very cool. Well, I want to just start from the basics here. I have an idea of what a narcissist is, and
hmm
I've had them in my life as well. But can you just tell us, like, what is a narcissist?
It's so important to start there because narcissist is a buzzword these days. And so if someone doesn't do what you want, then you say, oh, you're such a narcissist. And that's really not what we're talking about. So, narcissism is a personality trait that exists on a spectrum. You can be a little narcissistic to highly narcissistic. And when we talk about narcissism as a personality trait, we're talking about things like grandiosity, superficiality, superiority, entitlement, interpersonal exploitativeness, and a lack of empathy. Narcissists tend to have these self glorifying fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, attractiveness. They tend to focus on having very superficial personality traits like being charming, charismatic. They care about what things look like, but not really who they are behind closed doors. They have a sense of superiority, like that I'm better than other people. They kind of put themselves above others. They're very entitled. They believe they deserve special treatment, not because they've done anything in particular, simply because they exist. Their time is more important. What they want is more important. Everything takes precedence over you. Um, they also use people as pawns. They will lie to you, charm you, manipulate you. All depends on what they need from you at the time. And the hallmark trait of narcissism is just a lack of empathy. Narcissists just don't care how their behaviors impact you, and they're often kind of annoyed or disgusted if you share your feelings with them.
Interesting. It's an interesting topic because, say, for example, if I had a psychological disorder and I went to a doctor and I ended up getting a diagnosis for that for me, that would be very different than, say, someone who comes to talk to you about a narcissist in their life. So you're diagnosing somebody else through your client. So quite different in regards to that respect, right?
Very different. I'm so glad you bring that up, because there is a difference between narcissism as a personality trait and NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. That's why some people honestly advocate for removing NPD altogether, because then we get into this, well, am I diagnosing them by describing someone's behaviors? Actually, no. So when people come to me, let's say, and we're working together in therapy, then you can't diagnose someone you don't see. So what I will be doing, and what I encourage clients to be doing and everyone to be doing, is looking for patterns of behavior. It's like, we don't have a problem saying that someone's extroverted, or you're very agreeable, or you tend to be a conscientious person. Like, we're describing patterns of behavior. Agreeable people tend to be helpful and kind. Conscientious people are organized and disciplined. Narcissistic people are entitled and lack empathy. Like, we're not diagnosing, we're describing.
Sure. No, that's very interesting. Yeah, because you would have that perspective that if you're speaking with somebody about a narcissist, I just think about when I hear, let's just say for an example, my wife complaining about somebody, and she complains to me about that person. I'm just getting one side of the story, right? I'm not getting the other person's perspective of the situation or the conversation or whatever it is. So if you've got somebody in front of you who's got a problem with a narcissist in their lives, you're only getting one side of the story from that person, and we would naturally we would say things and emphasize things and exaggerate things to make the situation seem maybe grander than it is, or definitely make ourselves feel more like the victim. Have you experienced that?
Well, what's interesting is that true narcissistic abuse survivors tend to do the opposite.
Oh.
So they will come in and they will be laying out these awful things the narcissist has said, or how they grew up in childhood, and the things that their narcissistic parent has done to them, or how they've treated them. And they will not recognize how abusive it is. So a lot of, actually, initially, it's pointing out, like me pointing out to them, how did that impact you? Because narcissistic abuse survivors are often making excuses, justifications, rationalizations. They're saying it's not that bad. I'm sure it's just me. Can you help me? Like, the people who are coming to therapy are saying, I'm anxious. I think I have anxiety. I think I'm depressed. I'm always ruminating. I'm isolating. Like, what's wrong with me? So they're usually not, really talking bad about, quote, like talking bad about the other person. They're more saying, why can't I make this relationship work?
Interesting. So you end up defending the behaviors and actions and abuse that comes from that other person.
Right. And that's exactly what's so insidious about narcissistic abuse, is that it happens so subtly. You think the problems or the symptoms you're experiencing are you, instead of what's happening to you.
How does
You
that...
think you're the problem.
Sorry, yeah, you think you're the problem. That's so
Yeah.
interesting. How what's the psychological kind of phenomenon going on there? Because you'd obviously be at a starting point in a relationship, and I guess the narcissism starts coming from day one, I guess. But unbeknown to that other individual involved, they might not have experienced a narcissist before, or that type of tendencies or behaviors. And especially when you're meeting somebody for the first time, you want to make good impressions. You want to be kind of you want to make a good impression of yourself. So you're maybe not as authentic as you maybe would be in like maybe a longer term relationship. But what's the phenomena behind people defending the people causing them the most abuse and causing them stress and depression and anxiety, and leading them to the point of seeking help?
Well, let's take a wide angle view of this and look at the narcissistic cycle of abuse. So, narcissistic cycle of abuse is idealize, devalue, discard, hoover. So to break that down a little bit more, like you said, when you initially meet someone, let's just say for ease of conversation, it's a romantic partner. So you've just met someone. People often describe meeting a narcissist as a partner as the best thing that's ever happened to them. They're swept off their feet. Narcissists do something called love bombing. That's also part of that idealized phase. They narcissists learn about you. They learn about your insecurities, your vulnerabilities, your hopes, your dreams, and it tends to develop quite quickly. The relationship's usually intense. You move in together quite quickly, say I love you quite quickly, you're making plans together. Lots of future faking. That's another narcissistic term, like talking about plans, talking about our future together, talking about what we're going to build, what our kids are going to do, like where we're going to move, where we're going to travel. So you're in, like you are in this relationship, you're with this person before you've really had the time to know them, before you've had enough time to see, do they really follow through? What do they do with stress? Like, are they really a person of integrity? Narcissists are really good at the outer game, the charm, the charisma, the getting you in, the selling you this grandiose version of themselves that they want to think that they are. So by the time a narcissist starts gaslighting you, so that's where they start making you question your reality or sanity. I know that's a big word we can break down, but by the time they start criticizing you, devaluing you, being inconsistent, being more distant, kind of blaming you for things, you have this version of them that's charming and fun, and you've built this idea of life with them, or maybe you've already moved in with them. Like, so you're constantly trying to make sense of what you think is this new person with who you thought they were in the beginning.
Interesting.
So you have every reason to start thinking, what happened? I must have did I do something to offend them? Maybe I lost their interest. Maybe we need to hang out more. Maybe I need to be more attentive. And you start trying to be like, what can I do? And how can I help? And how can we make this better? And love languages and communicate better and all the things. And the narcissist just keeps moving the carrot. So you end up feeling like, I can't make this work. What's wrong with me? We were so great in the beginning. I must need, to do something.
That's fascinating. I think the idea that that in that beginning, that's that beginning of that relationship when everything you're basically being told everything you kind of want to hear, and the emotions wrapped around with that, and the experience, and your mind and your body starts to create an association with this person with feeling amazing, and then when that completely changes, you're always going to be connected to that initial experience, and you're always going to be probably chasing that like dream first few months or whatever that might be for somebody, or for a couple of people, and the brain and the body doesn't really forget that emotional connection to it. So I'm sure people are just continuing trying to chase that, and as you say in your wonderful examples, people are thinking, what can I do? What can I do to change this? What did I do to cause this? And people internalize it as their own fault, rather than actually sitting back and looking at the relationship at a whole, and actually having the idea that maybe I'm with somebody who is a narcissist, or somebody that wasn't being honest with me in the beginning. But I suppose we don't want to believe that's the truth, because then we're admitting to have been gamed.
Yeah. I mean, imagine how much pressure that would be for someone to come to terms with that. Like, let's say you are married to this person. Like I said, relationships tend to go quite quickly. And let's say that, you're married to someone and they're very critical of you, and they're always blaming you, or they're putting you down, or they're belittling you in some way. We feel very uncomfortable with that disparity. Like, you expect to be able to give and receive love from your partner, but in reality, it's the relationship's quite tense. It's full of criticisms and manipulations and put downs. And when we have that disconnect between what we expect and our reality, we experience cognitive dissonance. And that's that anxiety when reality and our expectations aren't matching up. And so we will try to alleviate our anxiety by justifying, defending, rationalizing, saying things like, well, he doesn't really mean it, or she just had a stressful day, or she said, once we get past the holidays, or once the kids, get to college, or whatever this thing is, like once we get through the stressful period, things are going to get better. And so you have a lot of buy-in to want to believe that this person is who you hoped that they could be or were.
In the research, and there's obviously must be extensive research on the personality traits within a narcissist. Are narcissists aware of their narcissism?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the traits of being highly narcissistic is that you lack self-reflection. So that's why dealing with narcissists is so challenging, because you're often the only one in the relationship who is willing to self-reflect, who is willing to step back and go, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have said it that way. Or, ooh, yeah, I could see how they would have taken that the wrong way. You're the only one doing that. Mm-hmm. And the narcissist is more than willing to let you be the person who takes all the blame.
So if a narcissist is not aware of their narcissistic tendencies and behaviors and that the damage that causes, mm-hmm. are they to blame for their behaviors?
So here's what I have to say to that.
I don't like the word blame. I don't like the word blame, but that's the only way it came out.
Right. No, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
How would they know what they're supposed to lie about if they didn't know who they should be? So when they come and make things up to you, like that love bombing phase, that whole thing that they're doing, and then they start kind of getting annoyed with you and disgusted with your emotions and start belittling you, and you feel like you're walking on eggshells because you never want to upset them. Like, they know whenever let's say you've had an argument and they've criticized you, and then maybe you set a boundary, and then they decide, you know what, actually I want to keep this relationship because I like how it looks for me. I don't really like what this is bringing up. Then the narcissist will come and like buy you flowers or say sorry or say the things that you wanted to hear, because that's another reason people often stay. They think, oh, they get it now because they're able to repeat back what they know they should be doing, but they don't have the kind of stuff that you need to make a relationship work, like integrity, consistency, faithfulness. They're very novelty seeking. They always default back to what I want, what I need, what's important to me. So they can kind of keep it together sometimes for a little bit. Yeah. But if they've had a stressful day and their supply is low, like they're not getting the admiration, validation, attention that they want, then they're going to start lashing out at you again.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think so many people can recognize somebody in their life or in their past life where they've had a narcissist close to them, I guess, whether that's actually a family member or a friend or something. Is there a typical pathway that leads to somebody becoming a narcissist? I assume you're not born a narcissist. I'm open to being wrong on that, but I assume that you're not. But is there a common pathway that leads somebody to have those types of personality traits?
You're right. Yeah, you're not born narcissistic. There is your temperament is like the biological part of your personality, whether you're difficult to soothe or easy to soothe, whether you tend to be agreeable or disagreeable. Narcissists do tend to be more difficult to soothe, prone to feeling more stressed, and just kind of antagonistic, like in their temperament. Yeah. But how they're formed is definitely that mix of nature, nurture, social, like all of it. They tend to grow up in environments that are both overindulging and underindulging. So these environments are overindulging in the sense of maybe there's a focus on achievement, status, goals, money, prestige, what things look like. Maybe the family doesn't even intend to do that, but maybe there's just a focus on achievement and performance, and there's an underindulgence in empathy, in emotional regulation, in relationships and how you feel and being able to be a giving, humble person. So there's like this lack of development of your internal world and caring about other people, and then an overemphasis on basically all that matters is how things look.
Mm-hmm.
And so that mix of all of that together.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's quite complex if you were to look back through like a narcissist's journey from birth and their parents
Right.
and their schooling, etc. It'd be a very complex process. But yeah, I'm just thinking about like we don't obviously. I've got two young kids. I don't actively parent them to avoid them being narcissists, but I also, well, let's say, let me reverse this because this isn't not exactly true. Most parents don't have a particular parenting style, so they have an outcome personality wise for their kids.
Right.
I think they should. Like for me, with my kids, I just want my kids to be happy and kind. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else will just like flow from there. But I've not really also had the thought of like, oh, I don't want my kids to grow up to be a narcissist. Like, how do I parent them to avoid that? You know, like
Yeah.
I think most parents should have some sort of like plan of like how do they want their children to be, and it's not about like forcing them to be kind and happy all the time. You do it through your own example and
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that come with being a parent, the exposure to that. But yeah, it's just interesting that we don't have that type of a particular parenting plan, or maybe we should be thinking about that. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And the two, right. I mean, that's a really big, how do I make sure my kid, or do my best to make sure my kid's not a narcissist? Like,
Yeah.
that's a big question. But the two things I would say people would need to focus on is empathy and boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
If you can teach your kid empathy, which means not only caring about others and recognizing that how they behave impacts other people, but within that, teaching them to recognize their own emotions, to recognize when they are feeling sad or angry, learning how to regulate themselves. And you teach them boundaries. You teach them respect of their boundaries and other people's boundaries. Then those two things are really going to be helpful to, those are kind of like the anti-narcissist parent toolbox. So if you had to pick two things to focus on, that's what I would tell people to focus on.
Cool. Yeah, I think about my own kids, and I think about everyone's potential to become narcissistic in like maybe like a short term, like
Mm-hmm.
you know, like maybe as a defense mechanism or as a safety mechanism, or perhaps when you hit your 20s. But obviously when we see kids go from 0 to like 18, they go through very different dynamics of personalities, right? Like my 2-year-old used to laugh when like someone would hurt themselves, so we're like, oh my gosh, he's a psychopath. He loves pain, he loves seeing people in pain, right? So we're thinking, oh my gosh, we've got this psycho on our hands. But he doesn't have any idea about like what the hitting is or the pain is or whatever like that, or him watching me do it. You know, it's just
Right.
it's silly. He's 2 years old, right? But there must be different stages within lives where we become significantly more selfish. Like I just think of like 16, 17-year-old boys primarily that I've got in my life are like some of the most like selfish people I've ever met.
Right. And there is and I hesitate to call it narcissism, because then I think we get into this debate of, well, then is everyone a little bit narcissistic?
Mm-hmm.
Not really. I mean, if an introvert goes out on a Friday night, they didn't just become an extrovert.
Sure.
Like, they're just an introvert who decided to go out. So if you have a selfish moment, or you're like, ooh, that really wasn't very empathetic, that doesn't mean you're a narcissist. Or you go through this period, like you said, where maybe you're in a trauma response. And so you're kind of cutting everybody off and you just don't have the capacity for empathy. You didn't just turn into a narcissist. But developmentally, that's why we wouldn't really be able to say someone is a narcissist until 25 or older, because that's really when the brain fully developed, you really start to settle into your personality. So yeah, the teenage years and all of that, it's more developmentally appropriate to see some of those more selfish behaviors. If they're still like that at 28, 32, 40, then we have a problem.
Okay. What's the most common narcissistic relationship dynamic?
Ooh, like parent, partner, work.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was just thinking about that. I've experienced in my life just having, you know, being involved with like I've got two young kids, and now I'm like, I have the, go to these parties. I'm at the park, so I'm seeing parents with their young kids, parents with their older kids, and I see engagements with parents and their maybe older kids where
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot of empathy there. There's not really any listening going on either way. And
Mm,
I guess there's got to be somewhere down the line, there's got to be parents that are significantly narcissistic towards their kids, because there is this, you're not peers as parents and
mm-hmm.
kids. There's a hierarchy that's important. There has to be, you're teaching there. It's very important to both parties to recognize that. But I think some parents who maybe, I don't want to say can't handle parenting, or struggle in moments when they've just got no resources to deal with whining crazy children, where they will put their foot down and step on this hierarchy dynamic full throttle, which will then turn into, like, narcissism. And over a while, that will build and build and build, and that's like a narcissistic relationship, rather than that person being a
Mm,
narcissist in their whole life. Do you know what I mean?
mm-hmm. Yeah, and in that situation, I mean, if we're only seeing if this person is functioning pretty well outside of their parent-child interaction, like they're doing well at work, they show up for friends, like they're doing other things, then I would say that is more of an example of just needing to deal with stress tolerance,
Yeah.
like just
Okay.
not having a good uh, grasp of stress, noticing your triggers, noticing when it's building up, noticing when you need to walk away. So you need to develop some stress management and coping skills strategies. I wouldn't say though that that's narcissistic, because if we're going to say narcissistic, then we would see this person interacting in a narcissistic way in virtually every area of their life.
Yeah, that's a key part of their personality. And just so I'm clear, like, being a narcissist has very kind of like strict criteria along with it, along the spectrum uh,
Mm-hmm.
of severity, I guess.
Right. We would expect to see these patterns of superficiality, grandiosity, entitlement, interpersonal exploitativeness consistently over time and in most of your relationships. So it's not going to be an isolated incident. This will be
Okay.
something that, pretty much is apparent in every area of your life.
So, in your practice, in your experience working with patients, is there a more common relationship dynamic, whether that's a parent and a kid, or
Mhm.
man and a woman, woman and a man? Like, what does that look like?
I'm, that's an interesting question. And I don't know exactly if there are even statistics on that. I think most of the research has been focused on what are the dynamics look like what are the patterns within narcissistic abuse. Honestly, it's not as researched as you would think.
Okay.
Narcissistic personality disorder is one of the least researched personality disorders. Even though it's inflated how much it's talked about, it's
Hmm.
actually not researched that much. Um,
Interesting.
but I'll say in my practice, I mainly work with people who either have had a romantic relationship or a family relationship with a
Okay.
narcissist.
Yeah, I think in my experience, especially in my 20s, I think there was more narcissistic men abusing women. And then I've actually seen more in my 30s narcissistic women, um, and they're men that are really, really
Mm-hmm.
struggling with it. So it's obviously not like one way. It can
Nope.
come in different. It's probably why the research is so weak on it, because it's super, super complex, right? And it's like, and also said before, it's like, you as a narcissist, you're not really aware of your narcissism, so you're not going to like go and see a doctor about it and get
No.
it researched.
No.
It's not really going to happen.
Right. No, it's not. And so that does make it difficult. The other point I was going to make about why narcissists, how do they know what they're doing, is because they don't always treat you poorly. They know when to turn on the charm, like when you're in front of other people,
Uh-huh.
and then behind closed doors and at home, like they're degrading you or they're attacking what you said or saying, how could you make me look like that? Like that was so
Hmm.
stupid what you said. But they don't say that in front of people that will call them out or in front of your family or if they're in an environment where they want to look good. And so that too lets you know that, okay, there is some level of, I know what I'm doing is bad. I just don't care enough to change it.
Wow. Yeah, it's so psychologically, it's so messed up, right?
It's so messy.
So messed
Yes.
up.
So many layers.
So many layers. Can you tell me what a trauma bond is, please?
Mm. Another buzzword for sure. So the first thing I like to say about a trauma bond is it's not an addiction, because we hear that a lot. We talk about, people often describe it like, I feel addicted to this person, and we can talk about why that is. But you're not addicted to them. You are stuck in a pattern of safety seeking. And so I'll give you 3 reasons of why a narcissistic relationship in particular is a good relationship for a trauma bond to develop. And that's basically when you become attached to someone who also hurts you.
Okay.
So it's not that you want the abuse, you want the pain to stop. And you love this person. Let's say they're your partner, they're your mom, they're your dad, they're your sister, they're your longtime friend. You don't want the abuse, but you want that attachment. You want the relationship. And so you keep coming back. Like, you don't want to be hurt, but you want to feel loved. And so you almost have to like go back to that person. And this is where people get stuck in this pattern of trying to make it work. Let me just try to approach them this way. Maybe they were having a bad day. Let me try this other communication strategy. Let me, all the different strategies that we hear about, and there's not a little amount of information out there about what you should do to make your relationship work. People in narcissistic relationships, though, it's often very one-sided. So these people are just trying strategy after strategy after strategy to make this relationship work with this person, and it never can work. So you end up feeling like it's me and I'm the problem. And although you are doing something good, you are seeking to improve the relationship, you're actually strengthening the trauma bond, though, when you do that. Because in your body, you want to have that attachment. And sometimes you do have a good day with this person. Like, it's not all bad. Maybe you have a phone call with your narcissistic mom and she was having a good day. And so you had a really good conversation and you think, okay, it's okay. Like, I don't have to cut my mom off. Like, I'm sure she really does care. She's probably just been really stressed. So you're like, okay, it's fine. You have that kind of settling in your body. And then you call her, and the next day or the next week, and she's completely criticizing you, blaming you, triangulating you, gaslighting you, telling you how you feel isn't right, and just criticizing you. And you leave that conversation feeling not enough, and you feel awful. And then you think, what happened? We had such a good week last week. Let me rack my brain trying to figure out, like, what did I do and what was different? Maybe she needs more encouragement. I'll send her a card, or you'll call her more, whatever it is. And so you can see how you get stuck, like going back to this person, trying to make it work. But when you do that, it's like you just go further and further down that trauma bonded hole.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned family there, and I feel like we've spoken quite a lot about like relationships with partners. When I guess that somebody who's been with a narcissist for a long period of time and maybe works with you, and they first of all recognize that they are with a narcissist and this person maybe doesn't have their best interests at heart, they can break up with that person. How do you deal with that when that's your mum or your dad?
Right.
Like, I suppose there are situations where you just have to kind of like break the relationship because it's so toxic towards you, and you're doing everything you possibly can. But at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't want to change and develop that relationship to be healthier, especially if it's like a pure narcissist, like can that individual actually change to the point where they can completely change their 20, 30, 40, 50 years of being on this planet, where they have developed these personality traits that leads them to be this way in relationships? Can people reverse that type of a thing?
I wouldn't expect it, and I wouldn't count on it.
Okay.
If this person, if you've grown up with them, like, let's just say the narcissist is your mom or dad or sibling, like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Like, we've might have heard that quote before.
Yeah.
And that's how you end up feeling in these relationships. They've been this way since you were a child. Maybe you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and you're just now seeing it or recognizing it or accepting it. Don't expect that they're going to change. And that's why this is a very highly personal journey. And there is no right or wrong. Some people do choose to go no contact, like they just cut off essentially from their family. More people find ways to stay in that relationship but increase their own feelings of safety. And that can be done through things like boundaries. For example, you can call someone, let's say, you want to call your mom, you want to check in with her, but as soon as she starts criticizing you, trying to gossip with you about your sibling, you kind of have a time limit where you're like, okay, mom, so good to check in with you. I gotta go, like, or I gotta take this call, or something else is coming. You start to manage the way you interact with them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice. And I just think about, I've just got people in my life who I know that are maybe chasing a relationship with their parents where their parent is clearly a narcissist, but they're chasing maybe this childhood dream that I think might not be real, because that we obviously experience the world with very different lenses when we're children with our parents, where we might have been psychologically or even physically abused for 95% of the relationship. But when we turn into adults and we have those very vague memories of being a child, we will probably remember happier moments, I guess, and they will get amplified. And then then in our adulthood, we're chasing those types of things with the same people, I guess. And that can be super, super challenging as an adult, because what we actually remember from our childhood and those memories with our parents, using the safety mechanisms that our brain will use, will probably sugarcoat experiences that were negative, and therefore we're chasing something that was never there.
Such an important point. And that's where a lot of my clients start, is they notice they're having symptoms like they notice that they're caught in people pleasing, and they kind of hate that about themselves, and they don't understand where it came from or why they're like that. And that's where we often have to start, is like deconstructing childhood and what it was like for you, because a lot of people will just gloss over their childhood and say, oh, my childhood was fine. Like we had some ups and downs, but they haven't really been honest with themselves, and for good reason. Like, going back to that, we all have a biological need to attach. You can't really allow yourself to see as a child that your parent is an abuser, or that they're, neglecting you in some way, or that they're really the problem here. Like, that doesn't feel safe. It doesn't even feel like an option. If this parent isn't who you think they are, then you don't feel safe. It's like, who's going to take care of me? It's kind of like that underlying question. So when you're an adult, you finally have this space. Maybe you're in a safer relationship, or you're not depending on your parent so much. So you can have those hard conversations, and you can say, well, really though, was my parent the best for me? Like, how did those things impact me? And that can be really painful, but that's also the only way to start healing that.
Is it common that a narcissist will raise narcissists?
So one of two things. They will either raise a narcissist, or they will raise a very anxious adult.
Okay.
It's usually one of the two. Obviously, narcissistic parents can raise narcissistic kids if they, dote on them to kind of tell them they're the best and transfer to them their entitled mindset. You can kind of see how that would happen. Or if you have a highly sensitive child, or a more naturally agreeable child, that child will probably become a highly anxious, people pleaser, codependent behaviors type of adult, because that child is going to learn very early on, okay, everything revolves around narcissistic parent. So the better I get at knowing what they need and giving it to them, the safer I feel, the calmer it is in the house, the less conflict there is. And so you're actually being rewarded for people pleasing. And so growing up in adult relationships, you're most familiar with that. That's what feels, in a way, safer for you, because it's what you're used to.
And are there any statistics around like how many narcissists are in like America? Like what percentage of Americans are narcissists? Pure narcissists?
So lifetime prevalence rates of NPD, which is again the diagnosable disorder, is about 6% in the US.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. It's so if you just like take that based on US population right now, it's about 20 million.
Yeah, it's like 18 million. That's insane. Yeah, that's crazy.
And of course, we're talking about NPD.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be diagnosed with NPD to be highly narcissistic or to cause significant damage.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, something that I'll talk about is like if we just assume that those 18, 19, whatever, 20 million narcissists affect 5 other people throughout their lifetime, like they narcissistically abuse 5 other people, then you've got 99 million or so narcissistic abuse survivors in the US alone. So when we say it's affecting literally millions and millions of people over the world, like it's not being over dramatic. Like, this is an epidemic, and it's getting more attention. Thankfully, now people are kind of understanding it more. But at this point, we're also fighting the narcissism as a buzzword, and then people want to shut it down because they're like, "Ugh, you're talking about narcissism? Like everyone's a narcissist these days," and that's so discouraging. And it really waters down the word and the term for people who really are being abused.
Yeah, and that's the real significance here, is those individuals that do suffer for their lives, significant portions of their lives, and they are basically tricked and fooled into this whole pattern. And yeah, it's absolutely devastating for those people because it's so difficult to pick up the pieces of that when you are spending your whole life blaming yourself for maybe like a failed relationship, and that's devastating.
And a lot of people do end up blaming themselves for these relationships that don't last or end.
Yeah, and then if you've been in a relationship for 20, 30 years with kids and a failed marriage, like picking the pieces up from that is very, very difficult. And then you've got kids who have been exposed to pure narcissism for a long periods of time, and those personalities are pretty much kind of set in. Yeah, as you say, an epidemic is absolutely devastating. I have a question for you. Is there a particular kind of person that often becomes the victim of a narcissist? Because we've spoken about the personality traits of a narcissist, but are there particular personality traits of the victim?
Well, we've kind of been dancing around it, but narcissists do tend to attract people who are highly agreeable. I don't know if attract is necessarily the right word, but narcissists usually end up with people who are highly agreeable because, well, narcissists might be initially attracted to other narcissists if they're both like getting something from it, like they're very high status or they look good being with each other, they're very attractive or something like that. But think about what a narcissist is. They're very antagonistic, they're highly disagreeable, they're quite selfish. Who's going to put up with that long term? Another narcissist is probably going to get annoyed with that. And so the more agreeable people are the ones who will be willing to self-reflect and try to make this work and try to give grace and try to give understanding. So empaths, people who are highly sensitive, people who are highly agreeable, they tend to be with narcissists. Introverts are more likely, I'll say that another way. Empaths are more likely to be introverts. So in a way, introverts can be more susceptible to it as well. And in general, just certain patterns that many introverts and empaths relate to, like overthinking, being easily guilted, having a compassionate heart, caring about other people's feelings. Those kinds of things are actually good things, but you do have to be aware and protect them from narcissists.
Yeah, I think about my relationship with my wife, which is just amazing. She's such a beautiful, wonderful, empathetic person, and I think I am as well. But I just think about the dynamic of like a introverted empath and a narcissist. Like it sounds completely chaotic, but it technically kind of works in the benefit of the narcissist, right? It's the perfect relationship for a narcissist. Obviously devastating for the other person involved, but it's just so hard to wrap my head around that actually working, but it works.
Well, yeah, to your point, it works for the narcissist. And highly agreeable people, highly sensitive people are very averse to conflict. And in a narcissistic relationship, you live in chaos. I mean, and so you're always just chasing your tail, trying to put out fire after fire. And that, again, like we talked about, strengthens the trauma bond. Of you just keep trying to make things better. And again, every day isn't bad. Like there was a love bombing phase.
Yeah.
And even within the relationship through the months or years or however long you're with this person, it kind of cycles through. There's good days and bad days, just like there's sunny days and rainy days. Because sometimes the narcissist they can be quite charming. They can be really fun. Like you can have a great time with them, or you might have similar interests. And so part of you really likes this person, but then the other part of you hates the chaos, but you don't know how to make that stop. So you just get stuck on this Ferris wheel of keep trying to make things work. And because you're an agreeable person, that feels pretty normal. Like it feels familiar to do.
Yeah, and I guess when you do have those good days and those bad days, you could probably relate that to just being in a relationship. Like, oh, everyone argues,
Right.
everyone has, and then you normalize it, I guess, and you maybe don't see the real negative sides of that and how that's probably not how most other relationships are.
Exactly. The relationship myths that are out there, like every relationship has ups and downs. Marriage is hard work. Like it takes patience. Everyone deserves a second chance. To an extent, those are true. Okay. No relationship is perfect. Everyone has ups and downs, but the kind of ups and downs in healthy relationships, it can be like life transitions. It can be genuine stressors that are very difficult. It's not the kind of ups and downs we're talking about in narcissistic relationships.
Yeah.
It's not that someone is criticizing you on a daily basis, and being antagonistic toward you, is gaslighting you to the point at which you don't even know who you are anymore and you feel like you lose yourself. The kinds of, if we could give it a weight, like for healthy relationships, you can have disagreements, you can have arguments, you still know you love each other. Like you still have other good parts of your relationship. With a narcissist, it's a cycle of abuse that's happening, so it's very different.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying though. I just imagine that the ups and downs that I have in my marriage are more like the downs are like a small puddle, and the ups are like
Yeah.
a nice fence in a farmyard. But the
Right.
ups and downs for narcissistic relationships are like chasms and mountains
Right. Right.
constantly, which is so stressful.
Exactly. Yeah. And that people often don't understand what you're going through because the narcissist may be really a great provider, or they're successful at work, or they have a great image. Maybe they volunteer for the church or other local community thing. And so on the outside, they look great, and you look like a great couple. Your family is well respected. Lots of narcissists have, they're doctors, they're teachers, they're lawyers. They either make a lot of money and they have prestige, or they're in these very caring roles, like being a teacher or a nurse or something. So from the outside, people think you have a great relationship or you have a great family. Like, why? What do you mean you can't get along with this person? So you end up thinking again, what is wrong with me? Everyone loves them. Everyone loves my mom or dad. Everyone thinks my partner is great. Why do I feel so bad
Yeah.
in this relationship? Why can't I make this work?
Yeah, it's so wild. You said the example of like a narcissist when you're with your partner and out with friends, and they're super fun and outgoing and such a great person, and then you get home and behind closed doors, there's all this abuse that's going on. And if you were the victim trying to describe that to your friends who was at the same party, you'd be
Yeah.
like, "What are you talking about? Like this person, he's great. Like they're wonderful. Like they're so funny and outgoing." And that victim might actually question the abuse that's going on. Like, am I like, is this is this normal? Like, yeah, it's it's such a tough thing to kind of put my head into as that victim, when the whole body and mind is probably screaming, get out, get out, get out, red flags, fire all over the place. But the power of this narcissist is so strong, one-on-one with that individual behind closed doors, but also like out there in the real world with other people who can have these realities and perspectives of this person. Unbelievably challenging.
Yeah. And so you don't feel safe to talk about the narcissistic parent or partner with other people because you either feel like they're not going to believe you, or you're going to look like a bad person. And you feel bad for even bringing this up.
Yeah.
And like you said, yeah, you get feedback from others that they seem so nice. I'm sure they didn't mean it. Or have you tried talking to them about it? Like, which is the worst. You can't talk to a narcissist about your real feelings. And then you get all this awful advice, well-meaning advice, but awful advice for narcissistic relationships. And yeah, you're deeper and deeper down that abusive hole.
Let's finish up and talk about post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a more positive topic that we can kind of finish up on. So why don't you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yes. So when you go through something traumatic, you really have two options: post-traumatic stress, post-traumatic growth. I don't know anyone who doesn't first go through the post-traumatic stress symptoms before getting to the growth, but some people kind of stay in post-traumatic stress. Those are things like rumination, changes in your sleep, eating, feeling hypervigilant all the time, feeling depressed, isolated. We're kind of more familiar with PTSD kind of symptoms, like feeling on edge, keyed up, all of that. Post-traumatic growth, though, is the positive change that can actually come after adversity or after traumatic events. And narcissistic abuse can definitely be one of those traumatic events. It really shakes you to your core. It makes you question and reevaluate everything you thought you knew about life, love, relationships. It makes you question your deeply held convictions and beliefs, like everyone deserves a second chance, or anything, can work if you try hard enough. And we often believe that until those beliefs hit a wall. And for most of us, or for a lot of us, narcissists are that wall. And so you start to reevaluate everything you thought you knew. I really break down in my book the insights and practical strategies for how to experience more post-traumatic growth after these relationships. But just touching on some of them, I find that a lot of survivors don't feel that they're very resilient. They often feel quite hopeless, helpless. They feel that maybe they did something wrong or they are bad and that's why this happened. They really lose their sense of self. And what I really want survivors to get and to understand is how much they've been through, and that they get to decide what they will make these experiences mean about them. Like, you get to decide whether you make this mean I was narcissist picked me and they abused me because I'm so weak and pathetic and I couldn't stand up for myself and that's why this happened. Or you can choose to see it and realize that I went through this because of my good qualities. Like, yeah, I need to learn boundaries, but it's because I'm so kind and empathetic and compassionate. Like, these are good things. The narcissist manipulated them, but that's on the narcissist, not on you. So post-traumatic growth is really about noticing the ways you have grown, noticing your resilience and your strength, and how much you have went through and how much you're doing to still heal from this.
Do most people who go into that post-traumatic growth, are most people working with somebody like you?
Well,
because I would think it would be very tricky to have those realizations on your own, unless you are into like a podcast where you're talking about these types of things, or you watch a movie or something about this type of a thing. Like, it's very, very difficult to, because the PTSD, that trauma, and the feelings and emotions that come with that, they can end up being quite addicting, and they can become a big part of your personality. And for a lot of people, they're like dis-ease or their pathology or their psychological state ends up becoming a huge part of their personality and who they are. And without that, who am I? So it can be quite a thing to grasp onto. But obviously people want to heal, people want to become they want to change from those types of tendencies, and they want to evolve, and they want to become in a relationship where their kindness and their empathy and all of those positive things are flourish, and they're respected and understood, and that can grow. But obviously that growth has to come. So what are there some other steps other than working with a professional like you that people can step into?
Well, you bring up a really important point, that people do end up feeling like they are their triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the healing mindset shifts that I talk about in my book is triggers validate your reality. They mean you went through something real, because you wouldn't have those triggers if you didn't go through something traumatic. And so even starting to shift to see, okay, I'm not weak. It's not, I'm not who the narcissist said I was. And these effects, like the hypervigilance, the anxiety, the depression, feeling emotionally shut down, like that's not you. That's what you've been through. Now, it is definitely helpful to work with someone who understands narcissistic abuse, or at least relational trauma or CPTSD, like complex trauma. But there are steps you could be doing. There is a lot of information out there now about narcissistic abuse, and even the like finding personally meaningful goals, finding people who get it, like whether that's a support group, like it doesn't even have to be if you can't find anybody in person. I know a lot of people find online spaces and they feel safer there, and they can just read like what other people have been through and start to recognize, oh, I'm not crazy and I'm not the only one who's been through something like this. Like that's a really powerful part of post-traumatic growth, is finding those spaces where you can feel seen and you can feel heard, whether you're participating or not. Even just seeing what other people have went through and relating to those experiences can start to help you recognize what you've been through and separate who you are from what you've been through.
Yeah, I think about, we were talking about the high numbers of narcissists in the world. That also means that there's going to be a high amount of victims of those people that you potentially could connect with. And I'm sure there are amazing groups online that support people. I'm sure there are courses you can do and podcasts you can listen to on these types of things, so you can get support in so many different ways. Are there any, off the top of your head, are there any particular groups or podcasts that you think people could benefit from? Because that's quite an easy thing people can click into.
I always recommend Dr. Romani. Dr. Romani is quite well known in the online space, and she has a healing group. I have a very active group, especially on Facebook, and I have a free newsletter that I send people on healing and understanding narcissistic abuse. So those are some that come to mind, and I really like people to find what resonates with them.
Yeah.
Because I think that's part of you learning to trust you, is finding those spaces that feel safe for you and validate you.
Beautiful. Yeah. I really think that going from that PTSD to that growth stage, which is obviously very important to be able to digest and eliminate that whole part, that whole personality that's would have grown up inside of you, to be able to deal with that trauma, and rather than suppress it and knock it down and maybe layer more on top of it, you're able to actually process it and go through that. And obviously it takes work. It takes serious work to do that type of thing. I think with any deep rooted psychological change, it requires that. It requires change, and change for me is doing things and thinking things and feeling things are unfamiliar and unpredictable and uncommon, and stepping into that type of arena is very, very scary for a lot of people, because it is just that, you're stepping into something that's unfamiliar to you, and the brain and body don't really like that so much. But if you really want to change those kind of previous patterns that have created a journey towards victimhood, we want new thoughts, new feelings and behaviors, really grasping hold of that growth process. And you spoke brilliantly about I experienced this whole situation because I've got all these wonderful personality traits, and I was just a victim of a psychologically, I'm not sure what the word is, a narcissist. Psychologically
antagonistic, manipulative person. Right.
Exactly. And it was kind of just like my unfortunate bad luck that I went for that. But you know what? I'm going to absolutely learn from this. I'm going to grow, and I'm going to do all these amazing things. And I bet you there are some phenomenal practitioners out there who are supporting thousands and thousands of people who went through exactly that, and they're doing what they do now because of their experiences, and they don't want other people to experience that as well.
Yeah, there really are. And that's one of the the most healing things that I love about working with clients in therapy and coaching is getting to see people's different experiences and helping them have those light bulb moments where they realize this is a thing, like this has a label, like this is triangulating, this is gaslighting. You mean that they were manipulating me the whole time? And starting to recognize that this isn't my own faults. Like this isn't because I was just so silly or stupid or foolish and I should have seen this coming. And how did I not know? Like, this is abuse. And once we can put that framework around it, it gives them the space to go, oh, it's what I've been through. Yeah. It's not who I am.
Yeah, I see correlations with this type of work with what we do here at True Hope Canada, and our flagship product is called Empower Plus. It's a broad spectrum micronutrient formula, and we have so much success with people who have had anxiety for long periods of time, people who've had depression, and what they're doing, they're providing their body with the necessary resources to change the way that their brain is functioning. And therefore, they're able to have different thoughts, different feelings, and different behaviors because their brain is physically changing with these new resources, ingredients, these completely necessary building blocks to create those new neural connections and those new synapses. And I see a correlation between that and changing, going from a victim to a survivor, and then going through that growth process, and then making you stronger and stronger and stronger. And once you kind of get a taste of that process, then you only really get stronger and stronger. And it's a beautiful thing to I'm sure you've experienced so many people that have done such amazing work, and they're completely new people going through such a traumatic event, grasping it with both hands and making the worst thing that's ever happened to them turn into the best thing that's completely transformed their lives. And we see the same thing with some of our products here at True Hope Canada, and it's an amazing thing to be involved with, and it's just such a pleasure to be able to serve people in that way.
I know that's been my hope for my own experiences. Like, I mean, it's been quite a journey for me. Like, I still have triggers. I'm still healing. I always say we're always a work in progress. But I wanted to take what I've been through with narcissistic abuse and give it back and be able to help people and give them a platform, a person who understands what they've been through. So, and I've seen so many of my clients do the same thing. Like how you can learn and grow from narcissistic abuse. Like once you really get through the healing and you're past the initial shock of it, but you're really starting to make sense of it. Yeah. Like you become such a stronger person because now you know what a narcissist is, what toxic behaviors are. Like you are so much stronger and more well equipped once you can move past, the initial part of healing.
Yeah, I think everybody can take if they can actively sit back and look at themselves and maybe find some things that they're not too happy with that they want to develop, and then take that challenge head on to change that, to reverse that. Maybe if I'm a judgmental, I used to be a judgmental person in my 20s, and I didn't like it. It wasn't serving me. It was sucking energy from me. So I did a lot of meditation to work through that. And now I don't step into being judgmental like immediately as like a reaction to a situation. It's much more of a response now, and I find it to be useful. But I feel like anybody can do that type of a practice. They don't have to be a victim of a narcissist, but there are some amazing things that people can do with change if they've got the right tools and ingredients and motivation around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Change is possible. You just have to take that first step.
Beautiful. Tell me about your book. Why did you write it? Who's it for? What's it called?
Yeah, well, luckily I have it right here. I didn't have it in here earlier, but here it is. It's called If Only I'd Known: How to Outsmart Narcissists, Set Guilt-Free Boundaries, and Create Unshakable Self-Worth. So I really wrote this for survivors. I wanted it to be very therapeutically sound. I based it on like over 400 stories that I collected from narcissistic abuse survivors. There's peer-reviewed articles in there, but I wanted to make it very relatable and practical and helpful for survivors. So this is for anyone who thinks you might be dealing with a narcissist. For sure you're dealing with a narcissist. You either are still or you have before, and you want to understand how narcissists think. You're tired of wondering and tired of thinking, man, that doesn't make sense. Like, I don't understand why they do these things or how they think because it's so radically different from how I think. So if you want to understand how narcissists think, how the cycle of abuse works, how to set those boundaries, even if you are highly sensitive or empathic, you want to heal attachment wounds, relational traumas, and you want to experience that post-traumatic growth. I talk about healing mindset shifts you need to make and the most common reasons people get stuck. So I really wanted it to be like this kind of comprehensive guide from start to finish, understanding narcissistic abuse, healing yourself, and then, okay, what do I do with everything I've learned? And so that's kind of who it's for.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I'll make sure that there are links in the show notes so people can find that and also find your website and your social media, etc. But just to finish, this is the real finish, far not to finish the show off. But we talked about a question at the beginning of the show, and I just wanted to ask you this. If you could give me a couple of points on this, that would be wonderful. What are the red flags that show that you might have a narcissist in your life?
The first red flag you're usually aware of is changes in your thinking. You start overthinking a lot. Things don't make sense. You're very confused. You tend to have a lot of self-blame. You're questioning. You're kind of replaying scenarios, conversations in your head. Things aren't exactly making sense. You start to experience more guilt. Like, why can't I ever, why do I have this issue with this person? Why can't we ever make things better? Or you feel like you're walking on eggshells, like you're quite hypervigilant, quite anxious a lot. Or you might notice that you're always people pleasing this person. Like, you give and give and give, and nothing is ever enough. And that's something I actually do break down in my book. I talk about warning signs that you're being narcissistically abused and break it down from every angle, because you're never responsible for the abuse that someone, for someone else abusing you. But if you can start to recognize those signs earlier on, then you can protect yourself sooner.
Beautiful. I think that's wonderful advice. Something that somebody can take right away to actually have a good think about their relationship.
Yes.
And apply right away. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. But that is it. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for coming onto the show. I really appreciate it. And I'll make sure that everything that people need to connect with you is going to be available in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I learned so much. I'm super excited to get this out there because, as you say, it's a big topic. And we want to make sure that people are getting the right information and not just the kind of the trendy nonsense. So I really appreciate your conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, that is it for this episode of True Hope Cast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. We'll be back with you next week. Don't forget to subscribe. You can leave us a review on iTunes and Spotify if you want to. But that is it. We'll see you soon. Thank you.